The future queen fell in love with the only man she was never allowed to love. Her husband's younger brother. The moment occurred beneath 6 crystal chandeliers during the Winter Foundation Gala at Buckingham Palace, an event arranged so carefully. It resembled theater more than charity. Diplomats drifted through gold-lit rooms, carrying champagne they barely drank. String music floated beneath painted ceilings. Somewhere beyond the ballroom, London disappeared into cold rain and black iron gates. Inside, everything glittered exactly as it should. Princess Helena stood beside Crown Prince Alexander, in silver silk and diamonds borrowed from women long dead. She smiled when spoken to. She nodded during speeches. She placed one gloved hand lightly against Alexander's arm whenever photographers approached. Years of royal life had taught her how to appear perfectly calm beside a man she no longer knew. How to love. Then Prince Adrian entered the room 20 minutes late. Rain darkened the shoulders of his evening coat. A palace aide hurried toward him immediately, whispering something anxious about timing and cameras, but Adrian barely listened. He never had. He apologized to no one as he crossed the ballroom, and Helena smiled, not politely, not publicly, but instinctively. Helplessly, like someone seeing warmth after a long winter. The smile vanished almost immediately. Unfortunately, Alexander saw it. Palaces noticed tiny things. A delayed curtsy, an untouched glass of wine, a missing ring. Entire wars had begun over less than a glance held too long across a crowded room. Alexander lowered his champagne glass slowly. For the remainder of the evening, he said almost nothing. The orchestra continued playing. Guests continued laughing. Somewhere near the west corridor, a footman dropped a silver tray. The crash briefly echoing through the palace like a gunshot. No one acknowledged that royal life depended upon selective hearing. The trouble with royal marriages was that they were often built backward. Ordinary people married for love and slowly discovered duty afterward. Royal people married for duty and prayed affection would survive inside it. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it learned to disappear elegantly. Alexander had chosen Helena because she was intelligent, disciplined, admired by the public, and calm beneath pressure. The palace considered her ideal future queen material. Newspapers called them the modern monarchy. The phrase followed them for years. Neither of them believed it anymore. Adrian complicated things simply by remaining human in rooms trained to reward performance. He spoke carelessly, laughed too loudly at formal dinners, disappeared from palace life for months at a time doing charity work abroad, then returned smelling faintly of airports and rain instead of protocol. People trusted him because he seemed slightly unfinished. Helena loved him for exactly the same reason. At first, Alexander mistook their closeness for relief. Adrian softened Helena during impossible events. She laughed more when he was near. Even palace staff noticed the change. Then they noticed something else. She only laughed when Adrian was near. The rumors began quietly, as royal rumors always did. Protection officer mentioned seeing Helena and Adrian walking through the East Garden after midnight. A maid discovered a handwritten note left inside a library book Adrian had borrowed. Seating arrangements became subtly complicated after aides realized the princess and younger prince had developed an unconscious habit of searching for one another in crowded rooms. No scandal existed publicly. But inside Buckingham Palace, emotional weather changed before storms arrived. Alexander ignored it for months, not because he trusted them completely, because the alternative humiliated him too deeply to examine. Then came the greenhouse. It stood beyond the eastern gardens behind rows of sleeping roses, built generations earlier for a queen history remembered as graceful and profoundly lonely. Winter rain silvered the glass walls after dark, turning the structure into something ghostly beneath the palace lights. Helena often walked there when she could no longer breathe inside ceremony. That night, Adrian followed her. The palace clocks had just finished striking one when Alexander woke alone inside the private apartments. Helena's side of the bed had already gone cold. Outside, rain moved softly against the windows. Then he noticed her wedding ring resting beside the mirror. Not forgotten, removed deliberately. Alexander stared at it for several seconds before standing. History often arrived quietly inside royal families. Never with trumpets. usually through doors left slightly open by exhausted people making emotional mistakes after midnight. The greenhouse lights still glowed through the rain when he reached the gardens, and through the fogged glass walls, he saw them. Helena standing beside Adrian beneath hanging white orchids. Too close. Not touching, which somehow felt worse. Adrian was speaking softly, his head lowered toward hers. Helena listened with the expression people wore when finally allowing themselves to stop pretending. Then Adrian reached for her hand. Carefully. As though he understood exactly how dangerous tenderness had become. Helena closed her eyes the moment he touched her. That was the moment Alexander understood. Not suspicion. Attraction. Love. The kind that had already survived months of resistance. Alexander did not enter the greenhouse. Humiliation. Preferred silence. He turned away before either of them saw him, walking slowly back toward the palace while rain darkened his evening clothes. And somewhere behind him the future he had imagined quietly collapsed beneath glass and winter flowers. The monarchy entered crisis before sunrise. Royal crises rarely began with shouting. They began with meetings. Private secretaries arrived before dawn. Press advisors canceled appearances. Phones rang endlessly behind closed doors. Staff moved through corridors with the tense politeness of people carrying emotional explosives on silver trays. By breakfast, Queen Margaret already knew. By lunch, 3 newspapers suspected. By evening, the palace was discussing containment. Helena was summoned first. The Queen received her inside a small sitting room lined with portraits of women who had spent centuries sacrificing pieces of themselves politely. For several moments neither woman spoke. Rain pressed softly against the windows. Finally, the Queen asked the only question that, "Do you love him?" Helena looked down at her bare hands. Curiously, she no longer seemed frightened, only exhausted. Yes. The words settled heavily between them. The Queen closed her eyes. Briefly. One truthful sentence inside a palace could be more dangerous than years of lies. "You would destroy the monarchy for this?" Helena looked toward the dark gardens beyond the glass. "No," she said quietly. "But I think the monarchy destroys enough people on its own." Elsewhere inside the palace, Alexander met Adrian alone. No servants were present. No aides, no witnesses. Only 2 brothers standing inside a room that suddenly felt too small for both of them. "You were supposed to protect her," Alexander said finally. Adrian's expression tightened almost painfully. "I was trying to." The silence afterward felt catastrophic. Because both men understood he had not meant protection from scandal. He had meant loneliness. For the first time in his life, Alexander realized his brother had given Helena something he never truly had. Not status. Not safety, but relief. 3 days later, Buckingham Palace released an official statement announcing that Princess Helena and Crown Prince Alexander had mutually agreed to reevaluate future personal arrangements. The sentence had taken 6 hours to write. No public statement mentioned Adrian. Officially, the younger prince departed Britain shortly afterward for humanitarian work overseas. Unofficially, exile had simply modernized its language. The public never learned the full truth, but palaces remembered. Years later, during King Alexander's coronation, millions watched Helena stand beside him beneath the cathedral lights wearing diamonds, white silk, and the careful expression royal women inherited like heirlooms. Beautiful, composed, almost untouchable. Then, as she lifted one gloved hand during the procession, an elderly palace attendant noticed something hidden beneath the fabric near her wrist. A moirzim, thin silver bracelet, worn smooth with age. A gift Adrian once brought her from a tiny market overseas. Long before any of them understood how dangerous happiness could become inside a monarchy. The attendant looked away. Immediately, palaces survived because certain truths were allowed to remain beautifully unspoken. And inside Buckingham Palace, love was the one scandal the crown could never forgive. Subscribe for more royal drama stories hidden behind palace walls.